Duke de Carl looked into the evening air. The last vestiges of light were fading as a storm was rolling in. Rain would be falling shortly. Good. He hated the sun, his most hated foe. It burned his skin and dampened his powers. The last thing a vampire would want. Oh, he was no mere vampire, but a lord, a king, who stood above those mortal peasants. Bah, they were not peasants, but cattle. They existed to sustain his needs. His stomach growled, he reminded him of one such need he still had. A hunger gnawed in his gut and urged him to descend the floors of his manor. Far from the sun was a room filled with his guests. The fledgling vampires were feasting on the livestock. Mostly those large bipedal lizards. Their taste was lacking, more like a vinegar than a fine wine. Useful for a seasoning, but far from being filling enough for a main dish. Oh, what he would do for a sweet morsel. Some nice human girl. Or even an elf. Much better. A bell chimed through the estate. Oh, bother. Why would someone be here? Some stupid fool lost in the woods around the estate. Scared to such a place because of the rain. Pathetic mongrel. Well, a little bit of fun was good for his health, chuckled the Duke. He beat down on the front door from the balcony. The wave of his hand, the great doors swung open to expose two rain-soaked individuals. One, a man, fat and plump. The other, a fine young woman. Very fine indeed. Evening, Duke de Carl smiled down wickedly. How may I be of service to you? Thank you, the man muttered. We got lost coming through the woods as the rains washed over us. I'm sorry to intrude, but could you shelter us for the evening? If only in your stables, please, my lord. Of course, the vampire smiled cruelly. I was just about to dine. Would you care to join me, travelers? Oh, we don't wish to intrude. It would be my pleasure. Do not worry about tracking mud in. My staff will clean it up. The two travelers looked to each other before following the Duke forward through the long, elegant halls. The finest furnishings decorated every aspect. For long, they found themselves sitting at a long table. Minutes passed, but the food was never brought out. The travelers looked to their host, but neither broached the topic. It would be rude. A giggle drew the man's attention to two women standing at the door. They crept in when their master beckoned them onwards. In a flash, they grabbed the fat old man, hoisting him into the air before flinging him into the far wall like a doll. The man shrieked in horror while the young girl's eyes went wide. The trap had been sprung. Don't worry, Duke de Carl laughed. If you don't scream, I may bless you. You don't want that beauty to be desecrated with old age. The man smiled, his fangs bared for all to see. Stepping forward, he prepared to enjoy his meal. Hello, and welcome back to Mythical Phylogeny, Spying Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason Diogos. Vampire is a legendary creature, one of the strongest undead you may face. They are terrifying with only a few weaknesses. Even then, they may not stay down. Let's take a bit and see what we can learn about them. There are plenty of different kinds of vampires in existence. You have variations in Korean, Malaysian, and Vietnamese which can have their heads fly around on their own. Today I'll be looking at the European variant, the vampire. Even then, there is many variations, and frequently inconsistencies between encounters. So what is going on? The answer to such comes from how a vampire is created. There are multiple origins, and each offers different abilities and complications. Be created by taking the powers from a succubus, gained from a vile ritual and ceremonies, or even from curses. The sources are never ending, and the more I dig in, the more I find. I won't be able to address all vampires in just one video, not even close. They are too varied to all be covered at once. I may very well need to make multiple attempts to cover this creature properly. Because of this, I'll be turning to help from the most famous of all vampire hunters, Bram Stoker and his associate Van Helsing, the novel Dracula. He is considered as one of the experts in the field and has compiled multiple legends in his works. Bram Stoker listed a few powers among vampires, just a few, including transformation into flocks of bats, mist, wolves, phasing through objects, object manipulation, flight, mind control, casting illusions, summoning, enhanced strength, speed, reflexes, hearing, and a healing factor. Just a few, right? As for weaknesses, there are a few: decapitation, garlic, sunlight, and holy weapons. So where do we start? Let's look into how we keep the undead living. This isn't the brainless zombies or the dried out skeletons. No. Vampires are intelligent. The only traits which separate them from humans is the pale skin and the fangs, and their need to feed on blood. As the undead, their blood isn't flowing and it will pool in their feet. This leaves the face pale, but the feet may look red or black from blood pooling in it, just like a leg with a venous stasis ulcer, where it can get blood into the foot but not out. But the vampire will have shoes on and hide it. That is assuming the blood hasn't already been drained for another purpose. The unmoving blood also lacks the vital nutrients the vampire takes from its prey. There are about 8 to 10 pints of blood in a human body, and about 6 to 12 calories per pint. Very little compared to the 2,000 to 3,000 calories that a human needs daily. It is a very poor nutritional supplement. Plus, too much iron to be healthy, but that isn't true for vampires. They aren't alive, and it isn't the calories that they need. There's something else in the blood. I am going to have to do some speculation. I propose that the vampire draws from the spark of life from the blood, the catalyst in many spells and magical contracts, and that is why I am thinking the blood is used to fuel the spells which maintains the vampire's unlife. And this is why sunlight can harm them. The light of the sun is a pure magical energy, much like the divine energy of creation itself. The foundation of such magic is the opposite to the magic which sustains the vampire in unnatural ways. These will deteriorate the binding spells that maintain our undead foe, but would explain why some can tolerate sunlight, but it will lose its powers. As the vampire ages, the potency of the binding spell grows and increases its powers. Prolongs exposure will destroy it eventually. This could explain the variations in their powers based on the power of the binding spells which they have. So, why garlic? Why does that affect vampires? First off, it is the garlic flower and not the herb which is eaten that affects the vampire. In my research, garlic is said to ward off negative energy and curses. It brings luck and good fortune. Could this be the same as why the wooden stakes to the heart are potent? The residual natural energy in the wood to disrupt the vampire's binding spell. I've heard that a stick of holly is best, but I have yet to find a difference. That explains some things, but the other powers are more complicated. They enhance strength and speed, and so on basic enhancement spells, though different than a spell that boosts strength and invigorates the target. Transformation requires breaking the body apart and reshaping it. This seems to contradict the binding spell I have been speaking about, but it doesn't. The binding spell can force the body to be reshaped. I would assume that the more intense the binding spells from additional blood, the greater its power. Wolf being the easiest form, then a flock of bats, and finally mist. As for mind control, that is a little iffy. Mind control spells need to subjugate the target with powerful magic. The vampire can do this easiest by drinking blood from its victim. This creates a psychic link between the two where one will dominate, which seems to be the vampire. Part of the binding spell I talked about would aid in the process, but Dracula could also place people under mind control without drinking their blood. But they were weak-willed to begin with, someone who already had a compromised mental stability. They can also use this to gain control of such animals as wolves and bats. Illusions are a particular branch of magic that I want to dedicate a full video to due to their complexity and the uniquity of how they work. As for flight, that is a simple levitation spell, no different than telekinesis or object manipulation, another of their powers. Creating a new vampire is an interesting act. There are a few general conditions which need to be met. First is the exchange of blood between the vampire and its prey. This creates a blood ritual where the binding spell can be copied and passed to another target. Yet there is often another, virginity. Someone who is pure and an innocent soul. Why? Could it be a requirement for establishing the binding spell? Vampires have 3 more issues to attend. They may not enter a house uninvited. This is the same as the demonic possession issue. As you live in a place, your soul leaves an energy deposit which can offer some protection. Inviting it in will all but bypass those protections. This brings me to why vampires sleep in a bed of dirt from their homeland. In the land that they spent their days, they will leave residual energy from their own soul in binding spells. By resting in such a place, they can take that energy back into themselves. Lastly, they can't cross running water. They can only leave boats at high or low tide. The best I can fear is that the binding spell can be washed away or weakened. I've tried to drag a vampire over a river, but it wouldn't cooperate with my research. Seriously, is it so hard to get a vampire to comply with an experiment? I even offered it blood. Not mine, some bandit that attacked me. Oh boy, this is going to be a fun one. First off, let's get the deck stacked in our favor. We don't want to give our foe an advantage, unless you are up for a challenge. First off, let's find its lair. Now, if you got time, let's dig a trench around it. Redirect a river to flow around its home and trap it in. Oh, this is too much fun. Get the vampire trapped on an island and let it scrape out, unable to escape you. Now, we move at high noon while it sleeps. Stock up on holy weapons, water, and blessed stakes. If it isn't a house, you can set it on fire. Burn it right there. Unless it has an escape tunnel, and I was assuming that there is. I would have one, wouldn't you? So what else then? Assault time. First off, the vampire may have mind-controlled goons that will have guarded in the day. You'll want to knock them out if you don't kill them outright, which you may do depending what you consider to be mercy. If you can catch the vampire while asleep, take it out fast. Yeah, that doesn't work. Oh, time to up the stakes. Bring out your holy weapons and watch out for illusions and summoning spells. Counter those accordingly. Remember, the vampire may have lived for centuries. It has more experience than you and your whole party. In a sword fight, you're fighting someone who is stronger, faster, and more experienced. A bad hand to be dealt. Try to fight with numbers on your side, but be careful and only take a party that you are confident in. Don't take any chances. Create a mist of holy water to entrap and damage the vampire. A nice damage over time spell with no danger to the living combatants. Have your clerics, monks, and druids bring forth their best and finest spells for banishing such things. Restrict its movements. For protection, I wouldn't skimp on armor. The vampire is stronger and better than you. Even without a weapon, the vampire could crush you. Plate, mail, gambeson, all of it will aid you. But better to just not get hit. Now, I've got a wild idea. What is the difference between a wooden stake and an arrow? Remove the arrowhead, and does the arrow become a stake? Could your archer stab the vampire in the heart from range? Generally, a stake is much thicker than an arrow, but you could fire a thicker arrow from a bow. In theory, you could pull this off. Once you've bested the vampire, you aren't done. Some can rise again. Ultimately, I return to Bram Stoker. Decapitated, put a stake through its chest. Stuff its mouth full of garlic, burn the body and spread the ashes at a crossroads. Overkill doesn't exist. Seriously, I like overkilling things. That way I don't have to kill them twice. Don't underestimate the vampire. It is a serious threat. It is no underestimate to put the vampire at an 8 of 10 for difficulty. Even when you have the advantage, you're going to be in trouble. Set the fight on your terms. Vampires are long-lived creatures. Many will accumulate wealth from prey or other methods. Gold, jewels, treasures galore. Rare texts and spellbooks may be found in their dens. You may also find survivors in their lairs. There may be a reward for bringing them back. That and a happy family. If the survivor wants to live. I've met a few who chose death after being freed. Too many horrors that still lingered in their minds. Lastly, the vampire dust. It can be a potent reagent in alchemical reactions. Powerful curses and even invisibility potions may use vampire dust at times. Duke Dakar moved in on the girl. His tongue licked his fangs, just as Julia wanted. In a flash, she pulled out a bottle which glistened with holy magic. She threw it at the vampire, who cautiously dodged it. What was that supposed to be? Just as the vampire spoke, he felt an itch on his skin. Holy water? But how? He turned his gaze to the door and saw a muscular man with a candle there burning. A large sword slung over his shoulder. Silver flashed before the vampire, and it jumped back. Pain raged through its throat as the girl revealed a pair of holy daggers. Adventurers, I've slain plenty of your kind. So have I, the girl taunted. At that moment, something shone from across the room. The fat man had pulled a scroll from his pocket. It shone with light like the sun. The Duke stumbled as his power was weakened. At that moment, Julia struck. Goodbye, vampire, she whispered as she cut the vampire's head off. Nearby, Grant cut down the two lesser vampires while they were distracted, screaming and wailing from pain. Thank you for your help, Julia bowed to her comrades. No problem, but I don't like being the bait. Kurt rubbed his shoulders from where he had struck the floor. I'm down to just 2 scrolls now. You'll be able to restock shortly. Let's check about for any more hiding in here. With that, the Demon Hunter set off through the state. Thank you for watching, Aspiring Adventurers. This could be a dangerous foe. That is why we have vampire slaying specialists. Please return next week, where we should take the chance with illusions. Until then, be safe, Aspiring Adventurers.